real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? lit, lit, lit. Real, live, lit, 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 right? The revolution is lit, lit, lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. In this study, we're taking the time to celebrate the incredible feat that is the Burning Spear newspaper, the revolutionary political journal of the African People's Socialist Party. We're going to discuss the significance and responsibility of this newspaper to contribute to our overall understanding as to why we must sell the spear everywhere that we organize. To begin, we'll do an overview that contains a brief history of the spear written by party and spear veteran, Comrade Omali K. Feng. Afterwards, we'll review the chairman's 1985 presentation titled The Social Responsibility of the Burning Spear. Then we'll take questions from our online audience. Make sure to like and share this video widely to increase participation in these important studies. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this overview. The most accurate historical record of the international African liberation movement since 1968, without contradiction, can only be found in the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. The Spear has consistently told the story of the heroic fight back and organizational efforts of the African working class to free itself from white power colonialism and neocolonialism throughout the world. We can go to the next slide. In 1968, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, known then as Joe Waller, founded the newspaper in St. Petersburg, Florida. The Burning Spear newspaper was founded as the official news organ of the Junta of Militant Organizations, JOMO, which developed as a revolutionary membership organization through the struggles of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the civil rights movement in the southern states of the U.S. In 1972, the Burning Spear was adopted as the official news organ of the African People's Socialist Party at its founding, as JOMO was one of 3 groups that merged to create the African People's Socialist Party. Next. The quest to create our own working class intellectual cadre, an intelligentsia that comes directly from the ranks of the African working class, has been a prime objective of the African People's Socialist Party since its inception. It was recognized early on that in order to compete with those opposed to African freedom, that it was absolutely necessary to create our own media. Next slide. Thus, the creation of the Burning Spear newspaper to contend in the arena of the war of ideas, the white bourgeoisie worldview versus the worldview of the African working class. The mission of the newspaper has to explain the world in order to change the world. Throughout its now 55-year history, the Burning Spear newspaper has carried out this mission in a myriad of ways. One sure way to gauge or judge an organization's commitment to the revolutionary project is its documentation of what it wants, what it believes, its political work, and its position on major and minor political and military events in the world. In other words, its commitment to a political journal or newspaper. Next slide. The Burning Spear newspaper's first edition was done on mimeograph letter-sized paper, but nevertheless, it was a newspaper and something to be proud of. The African working class had its own news organ speaking to our people in our words. Despite what the white newspapers said about Jomo and our work, we had a newspaper of our own to contest them in the struggle of ideas. Next. We had read and knew that Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association used the Negro World newspaper to organize some 12 million Africans from throughout the world. We knew that Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam had built Muhammad Speaks and was distributing 500,000 newspapers per week. We knew that the Black Panther Party and its newspaper, the Black Panther, were distributing some 100,000 newspapers per week among the oppressed and exploited African working class. That Africans the system had deemed incorrigible were reading the Black Panther and works by Chairman Mao and Frantz Fanon. The absolute necessity for the African People's Socialist Party having its own news organ has been a priority from the beginning. Next. We have printed this newspaper when there was no food on the table. We have printed this newspaper while ducking and dodging the landlord, the light, gas, and water people, etc. That was our commitment to ensure that the people would be served and that the revolutionary project would not be altogether silenced. We were and are intent on completing the Black Revolution of the 60s. The records that are inside the pages of the Spear are stories, chronicles, analysis, opinions, photojournalism, and just general documentation that enables us to more scientifically present to the African working class a worldview that informs our aspirations for self-determination and socialist democracy. In the opinion of the Spear editorial board, next slide, please, which is the Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party, the question is not the Spear versus social media. We of the Burning Spear are African internationalists. We subscribe to no aspects of American exceptionalism. So when we hear the argument that nobody reads newspapers because everybody is on social media, we know that that opinion is ill-informed. As African internationalists, we understand that most Africans in this world that constitute the African nation do not have access to the internet. We know that the millions locked down in US prisons do not have access to the internet. The whole African nation, however, has access to the Burning Spear newspaper and that it can travel throughout our communities, including prisons, until the ink fades away as it teaches valuable lessons and serves to keep the revolutionary trajectory of the worldwide Black Revolution on track. We also recognize the significance of social media. In this regard, there is theburningspear.com, the online version of the Burning Spear newspaper. Every social media app or outlet that is available online is being used by our social media teams. So there really isn't social media versus the Spear. In the African People's Socialist Party, next, there is no work that is more important than for cadre to sell the Spear on the streets. Selling the Spear should be scheduled into every party member's things to do today list. It is the primary organizing tool of the African People's Socialist Party and has been since its inception. It is the thing that keeps us before and in touch with the African working class masses, on the job, in the housing projects, on the street corner, and everywhere else the class might be. It holds us accountable to the people. In every issue, we print the party rules of discipline and our 14-point platform, what we want, what we believe. Next. The Spear introduces the masses to revolutionary thought and action. The Burning Spear newspaper is what keeps the Uhuru movement cohesive, glued together on the same trajectory. The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, the African National Women's Organization, the African People's Education and Defense Fund, the African People's Solidarity Committee, and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement are all informed of each other through the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. The work of the Black is Back Coalition for social justice, peace, and reparations, and other movement activities can also be found in the pages of the Burning Spear. Although not easy and without state interventions, we have nevertheless forwarded the aims and goals of the Spear. Next. On one occasion in 1976, before I go there, I just want to also state that the history of the African liberation struggles We've summed this up as concentrated in the history of the African People's Socialist Party, but it's also in the pages of the Burning Spear, including the glorious history of the party itself. Next. On one occasion in 1976, the paper was sabotaged at the printer because a page consisted of an African man bent over using the US flag as toilet paper with the caption, "A bicentennial salute." The paper came back with the page black and the printer refusing to print the paper. On another occasion, immediately following the more than 900 Africans murdered in Jonestown, Guyana, the initial story in the Spear came back so jumbled up from paragraph to paragraph that it was incoherent. The party had made the only correct analysis of the Jonestown murders that I have seen up to date, but we persevered. In the early Spear, you can find the party fight off the death penalty in Florida by waging a successful campaign to free Pitts and Lee, two Africans railroaded to death row in the late 60s. In the pages of the Spear, the international struggle led by the party to free Desi Woods and smash colonial violence brought the Black liberation movement back to life from the crushing military defeat through COINTELPRO. Next, the exposure of the massive prison system and the captured political prisoners and prisoners of war through the concentrated years of struggle to build the African National Prison Organization happened from the mid-70s through 1980. Sundiata Acoli, Assata Shakur, Erman Bell, Anthony Bottom, and other captured African patriots were kept before the public through the pages of the Spear. The slaughter of 7 members of Nelson Johnson's Communist Workers' Party, including Sandy Smith, Johnson's wife, at a Dare the Klan rally in Greensboro, North Carolina in November of 1979. This story is told and put into perspective in the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. The Move bombing in Philadelphia on May 13, 1985 is chronicled in the pages of the Spear. This and testimony at the World Tribunal can be found inside the Spear. The electoral campaign to run Alvalita Donaldson for city council in the early 80s, the struggle of the Tampa Bay Four. Oh, you can go to the next slide. The mobilizations against the police murder of Willie Big Man Daniels by St. Pete cop Leonard Leedy and taking up the struggles of the nurses in the nursing homes of St. Petersburg are all in the pages of the Spear. Recent struggles for justice for Tyron Lewis and the struggle around the 3 drowned Black girls can be found in our newspaper, and also the Hands Off Uhuru campaign. The big-time land reform struggle in Oakland, California, known as Measure O on the ballot, which reached a revolutionary pitch, and the struggle against the death penalty and to free Freddie Roberts brought the entire city of Oakland back to political life that had not been seen since the Panther days. It's in the Spear. Oh, we can go back to the last slide, actually. I really want to show this last slide. Yeah, right here. So the exposure of Jesse Jackson and a host of others as bootlicking sellouts during Jackson's run for the Democratic Party nomination in 1984 is chronicled inside the Spear. We said in 1984, no confidence in the U.S. government, male or female, Black or white, Republican or Democratic. We said it with Barack Obama, and we say that now. The FBI fiery mass murderers at the Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, under Bill Clinton's leadership, is explained in the Spear. The invasion and toppling of the New Jewel Movement government and murder of Maurice Bishop, and the invasion of Lebanon by U.S. President Ronald Wilson Reagan, the heroic struggles of the Vietnamese, the Chinese Revolution, and the fight for communist integrity in China can all be found in the pages of the Spear. The struggles of Africans in Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea-Bissau against Portuguese colonialism can all be found with analysis in the pages of the Spear. In addition, the assassination of Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso and the anti-settler colonial struggle against the murderous Rhodesian regime by ZANU and then occupied Zimbabwe is there as well. And perhaps more pages of the Spear have been devoted to the Azanian front of the African Revolution than any other front outside the U.S. Since 1976 Soweto uprisings and the mass murder of our children and young people there, the struggle inside occupied Azania has been a mainstay in the pages of the Spear. From our ideological and material support of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania to our consistent exposing of Nelson Mandela, Bishop Desmond Tutu, and the African National Congress and neocolonialist sellouts, if one wants to know why the situation as it is today is in occupied Azania, look to the Burning Spear newspaper. So next, we'll go 2 slides. Next. Perhaps the Spear's greatest contribution to the party and the African Revolution is the role it played and is playing in giving Chairman Omali Yeshitela a forum in every issue to develop the liberating worldview of revolutionary African internationalism, the theory of the African working class. Through the point of the spear, a permanent column in every issue of the spear, Chairman Omali has consistently answered the lingering theoretical questions confronting the movement through actual on the streets with the people practice of the African Revolution. Chairman Omali brought the science that defined colonialism and taught the masses and movement that the struggle is for power and not a struggle against the elusive racism. Above all, Chairman Omali, through the point of the spear, has defined the African nation and exposed the treacherous African petty bourgeoisie and neocolonialism. And next slide, we'll give the last word on this spear anniversary statement to a comrade who knew the importance of the party and its newspaper. Comrade Huey P. Newton had this to say at a 1986 rally to free Freddie Lee Roberts at the Uhuru House in Oakland, California. Huey said, "You might not have the Black Panther newspaper, but you have the burning spear. So they haven't done anything by crushing one organization. Long live the burning spear, independence in our lifetime." And if we can go to the next slide, also want to say salute and long live our comrade Omali Kafang. So Uhuru comrades, that is just a brief overview of the significance of the Burning Spear newspaper and our now 55-year history since its inception, its mission as part of forwarding the African Revolution, completing the Black Revolution of the 1960s, and everything that this spear and this party has gone up against to make sure that we can continue producing this. I mean, that's a cadre stance. That's a relentless stance to say by any means necessary, this revolutionary political journal will reach into the hands of the African masses. I mean, that is just such an incredible struggle, an incredible feat, and just really want to salute the chairman, the party, and the incredible 55-year history of the Burning Spear newspaper. So at this moment, I would like to turn it over to the founder of the Burning Spear newspaper, as well as the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, Comrade Director, I want to express appreciation for the introduction and for the study discussion that we're about to do on today. You mentioned through your own words and through the words of Comrade Omali Kafang, our dear comrade, who truly was a journalist and who a revolutionary journalist and who tried to teach our party, our movement, how to be revolutionary journalists. I just want to express appreciation for all that you have read in introducing this, and just say that everything that's been stated about the significance of the spear and what I will mention in discussing and going over a presentation I made some years ago in 1985 about the significance of the spear, I think is very correct, very important. But one thing that I want to add to that discussion that's become increasingly significant to us, and that is the importance of reading. And we have a situation where, as you mentioned, so many African people do not have access to social media, do not have access to infrastructure that will allow for them on a regular basis, sometimes even electricity, to participate with computers and cyberspace and the like. But on the other hand, those who do, and that's not just Africans, but it's pretty important for us in terms of what we have to do as organizers. And the fact that we have to take the revolutionary revolutionary theory to masses of our people. This theory is something that's not appreciated very much by even people who call themselves revolutionaries. And they take the line of least resistance, and the police kill somebody and say, rah, 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 let's go against the police and target them and say a lot about them. And all of that's quite appropriate. But the material basis of why it happened and what has to be done beyond simply responding to what is occurring at the moment, that's not something that's very well appreciated. There's not a generally respect of the need to take revolutionary theory into the masses of working class people. There's a kind of accepted presumption of the ignorance of the masses and as a permanent factor that can never be challenged. In many ways, this is uniting with the assessment that has been handed down by the colonial ruling class, even that would allow it to tell the world that they're attacking the African People's Socialist Party that's been in existence for more than 50 years because we're too stupid to come to our own conclusions that somebody they consider white, like Russians, had to tell us what to do. There's a way that much of the movement unites with that. When we used to hear this all the time, that, yeah, I understand what's there, but the people, the masses, this is too heavy. They can't understand it, which is really preposterous. And it's based on this not only colonial based, what might be characterized as racist assumptions that permeates every aspect of the life that we live in, but the class assumptions that somehow working people, the oppressed, will never be able to grasp this reality. And it also makes a statement that's perpetrated by the system of the significance of special people. You have to be a special person. You have to be this like me. You have to be like me. I understand it. Yeah, I understand it, but the masses can't understand it, which is just, it's so insulting. And it's the bourgeoisie speaking through the thick black lips of Negroes who go along with that. So reading is extremely important. And the Burning Spear is important. There needs to be Burning Spear reading clubs in every community that we're in. Then this needs to be happening. We're reading and discussing the content of the Burning Spear. And we say this because what we live in is a world where in this social media era, this era of this technical intervention in the lives of technological intervention in the lives of the people, more and more attempt to function as the brains of the people, that the people don't have to exercise their own brain, their own imagination, what the bourgeoisie will imagine for you. So at least when you read a story, you have to use your own imagination. You have to see with your own brains, your brain cells work. And it even helps to develop this entity that is the brain. The brain is matter. And so it is the basis for the existence of this thing that people like to call the mind. People like to talk about how mind over matter. There's no such thing as mind over matter. It is matter in the form of the brain that is a condition for the existence of the mind. It is matter existing, developed to its highest stage that produces this thing that we call the mind. So it's really important to recognize that the brain must be used, must be utilized to be functioning and to be able to achieve what's necessary for advancing to the future. But if everything that you come to understand, you don't have to use your own imagination for it. Even, like the difference in a movie and reading a book. You read a book, you have to, in your own brain, you have to use your own imagination about what that looked like, how that smelled, what it was that was being experienced. You go to a movie, it does it for you. You don't have to do that. There it is for you. And, sometimes, of course, movies do better reflect what's in a book. I mean, that used to be much more common than it is today. But now what we see is that more and more, the human brain doesn't have to work. Something works for it. You don't even have to know how to count. You go through checkout at your local big box store to purchase something, and the person working there doesn't have to count. You go to a restaurant and a picture comes up, and there's another kind of language that's being developed that's a substitute for language that comes from that exercises the brains and imagination of ordinary people. So I know I'm saying a lot here, but reading is extraordinarily important. And we cannot allow them to take that away from us. We brought reading, literature, writing, literacy to the planet Earth, and we have to recapture that. So on every corner. People need to be discussing the contents of the Burning Spear in every household, in every community. This needs to be happening. And we need to encourage people to do that. And of course, we want that to be in the Burning Spear. I mean, I learned to read a newspaper. We're talking about the newspaper, the Burning Spear now, but as a child, the thing that I learned to read was not one of these silly Jane, Dick, Jane, look, Jane, run, walk, this kind of stuff. It was actually newspaper. That's what I was taught to read in. And that's, I think, helped to facilitate. I had to imagine what it was that I was reading about, the lynchings and the brutality that's being imposed, because that was in the newspaper all the time as a child. And so we can take this and we can teach our children, our neighbors, and our people how to read and then how to grasp ideas. We create the working class revolutionaries, intellectuals, because we help people make it possible for people to navigate this ideas. And so as opposed to now where this terrain is occupied solely by the by the ruling class and rich people and things like that, ordinary people must maintain a capacity and grow a capacity to read, intellectual development, intellectual involvement, the basis, the origin of ideas. Where do they come from? What is an idea? Hell, we don't even have to have an idea anymore, just except how to turn on a computer and how to make it work. You know, children, I could read when I was in diapers. And what we have now is children knowing how to go to social media and operate computers while they're in diapers, go to a smartphone and operate it while they're in diapers, but they can't read necessarily. So I'm just saying that the significance of reading the Burning Spear goes beyond much of what it is that we've said now, that we've said up to now. It is extraordinarily important. This is a rule of revolutionaries to take this to the masses of the people, to help the people to grasp ideas, to read with the people, read to the people, teach the people how to read, if that's something that's missing in their lives and what have you. It's really extraordinary, because on the one hand, they take the people away from the capacity to read. Even this thing that they call schools do that. And then on the other hand, they slander the people because they can't read. They hold up reading as this great statement of intellectual capacity. If you can't read, then you must be backward, stupid, or some other thing like that, which of course is not the case. I mean, I think George Bush could read. So I want to just say those things and move beyond, that. And I also want to, we mentioned this in passing, and even in the introduction that comment director just made about Muhammad Speaks. Muhammad Speaks was the newspaper of the original Nation of Islam. It was something that was created, laid out in Malcolm X's kitchen. He is the one, who kicked that off. And it became, in many ways, a template for what revolutionary African newspapers look like, what we want, what we believe. This is Malcolm's, taking out the message from the Nation of Islam, which was a different kind of organization, obviously, than what we have, but it set the template. And the Black Panther Party, other organizations influenced by that. I just think it's really important to recognize the impact, the imprint of Malcolm X, in this discussion that we're having now, because in many ways he is the ideological father of much of what it is that this iteration of our liberation movement looks like. So I'm going to go now to the social responsibility of the Burning Spear is to serve the oppressed and exploited Black working class. This was dated December 2018, a newspaper article in the Burning Spear newspaper. And this was was an excerpt from a presentation that I made in 1985 in Berkeley, California, at a forum on Does the Media Tell the Truth? And I don't remember all of the persons who participated in that forum, but I can tell by looking at the presentation that I'm going to read now. One of them was a representative of the Oakland Tribune. which was at the time a declining leading ruling class media outlet in Oakland, California, where we were doing an incredible amount of struggle, and where we were struggling at the time. You heard the quote from Huey P. Newton about the fact that the Burning Spear existed meant that the ruling class hadn't done anything by destroying the Black Panther Party and the Black Panther newspaper. So this is an excerpt. So what do we mean then when we talk about social responsibility of the media? There's an attempt all the time, particularly by media such as the Oakland Tribune. I like to pick on the Oakland Tribune. It picks on us a lot to put forward this notion that we're all just one happy family. If just these loud mouths of whomever it is they're about to mention here occasionally would shut up. There's something missing there. After all, they would say, Oakland is the most integrated city in this country. They put out that garbage all the time, but they don't give you the data, which helps people to understand how this integration works out in the real world. And it's meaningful that this statement is being made, the most integrated city in the country. And we will quote here Milpitas, something about the conditions in Milpitas, which is about 35 miles away from Oakland, California, which is predominantly white and predominantly rich, as compared to like Oakland, California. And I think in today's New York Times, there's an article that based on a study that was done in California of thousands of people that shows the difference in their life capacity, life expectancy of Black babies versus white babies, and shows that how even rich African women have babies that die in the first year of life at a greater percentage than poor white women. So we're not just this one happy family like they would like to pretend, like the FBI would like to pretend that we're this one happy family. If the Uhuru movement, if the African People's Socialist Party would just shut up, if the African People's Socialist Party would not allow the Russians to create this slanderous view of America to the rest of the world. This is how they would perceive, they would put it forward. So we say that in the real world, this integration is a police department whose vast majority is white, 85% of whom live outside of the city of Oakland. They are like the Contras in Honduras who come across the border to kill Nicaraguans. They downpress the masses of the Black population in East and West Oakland and the so-called flatlands. The vast majority of them are white and live outside of Oakland. The vast majority of the victims is Black and live in the flatlands in Oakland. That's your integration. A white police chief. The integration that we are talking about is one that has resulted in, at one juncture, a figure of around 10,000 homeless people. It's come down to 3,000 now since the Uhuru movement became involved in the question. At least 60% of the homeless people are Black. We don't know who the others are because the others, I guess, are not yelling loudly enough. That's your integration. Your integration is such that in Black Oakland, the infant mortality rate is 4.5 times higher than what it is for white Piedmont. That's your integration. And Piedmont, by the way, is a sector that used to be like Oakland, except the white people lived there, carved out their own little city right smack dab in the middle of Piedmont, so that that's very wealthy compared to the rest of Oakland. But Russians must have told me to say this because obviously in this great democracy that we call America, this colonial reality could not possibly be existing. Let's see, integration is such that in Black Oakland, in East Oakland alone, we have a situation where more than 54% of all the residential rental property is owned by white people who live outside of Oakland. And more than 80% of all the commercial rental property is owned by white people who live outside of Oakland. We have integration in Oakland. That integration is such that in a 5-year period, more than $300 million leave the Black community in East Oakland alone in the form of rent. And this was in 1984, 85 or something like that we're talking about. And somebody wants to know why there is a drug economy, an illegal capitalist economy, because the legal capitalists have withdrawn the ability of the people to live. They know that's what it is, and the drug economy could not be there without the assistance of the people who operate the Port of Oakland, where the vast majority of the workers are white and not Black. They know this. It's the Oakland Tribune where we read about the so-called drug kingpins. What drug kingpins in the Black community? There's no place where we process the poppies in Oakland in the Black community. The social responsibility of the media. I read a newspaper article the other day in the Oakland Tribune, probably, where someone from Milpitas got caught crossing the Mexican border with $25 million in heroin. If there's a need for a special task force, which is nothing but martial law, it's in Milpitas, not in the Black community of Oakland. Milpitas, as I mentioned, is some 35 miles away from Oakland, white, rich. I mean, very, very rich. So what are we talking about when we talk about the social responsibility of the media? We must first realize that we are talking about oppressed people. We must first recognize that we are talking about class differences. It is in the interest and it is the social responsibility of the slumlord to get as much as he can for the joint that the people are living in while doing as little as necessary for the place. It is the social responsibility of the tenant to pay as little for the joint he's living in while getting his landlord to do as much as he can for the joint. That's social responsibility. There are different social responsibilities. It is the social responsibility of the undertaker to get as many dead bodies as he can in East Oakland. He likes the fact that Black people live 7 years less than white people. I don't care what color he is, because the fact of the matter is his reality is tied to Black people dying. It is my responsibility to live as long as I can. You've got these contending responsibilities, at work here. Someone wants to tell me that we have a common social responsibility. This media would have me believe that it's my responsibility to make my determinations not on my interests, my objective material interests, but on the question of whether someone makes a good speech or they're nice or whether they believe in integration. They would have me believe that because the slumlord is a nice person, because he loves his mother, and perhaps even gets married in a situation where his wife wore white, that I should give him all my money. They would have me believe that because the undertaker makes good speeches, I should accommodate him by dying early. We say no, there are different objective material interests at play. The people in this room, the people in this city, the people in the Bay Area, and the people in this country had best begin to understand what our interests are. In the 1960s, the Black Panther Party at its peak published 250,000 newspapers every week. The social responsibility at that time of the Oakland Tribune, which did not have on its masthead Mr. Maynard's name, was to hold up the interests of those forces who would destroy the Black Panther Party. The question must have come up about Huey P. Newton's picture being on the masthead of the Black Panther Party newspaper as some kind of contradiction compared to what the regular bourgeoisie would be doing. In the 60s, at its peak, Muhammad Speaks, the publication of an organization that many call the Black Muslims, had a distribution of 500,000 newspapers every week. You couldn't go to a city in this country where someone was not reading either Muhammad Speaks or the Black Panther newspaper. Nowhere could you find that. Whose truth does the media tell? We had two social interests at work. We had several different social forces being responsible. The Black Panther Party being responsible to the oppressed and colonized Africans, while the United States and the Oakland Tribune even then being responsible to the same forces it is responsible to now. We call those forces by name. They are named Cornell Meyer. They are named Robert Shetterly. They are the people who own and control Kaiser, who own and control Clorox and Hyatt Hotel, and who keep the people downpressed and living in misery. Downpressed is one word, by the way, with maybe a hyphen. When an opportunity is apparent to disrupt or neutralize Black nationalist hate type, this is in parentheses here, in quotations. When an opportunity is apparent to disrupt or neutralize Black nationalist hate type organizations through the cooperation of established local news media contacts, or through contacts with such sources available through the seat of government. In every instance, careful attention must be given to the proposal to ensure the targeted group is disrupted, ridiculed, or discredited through the publicity and not merely publicized. So you gotta disrupt, discredit, and all these things if you write about them. Consideration should be given to techniques to preclude violence-prone, rabble-rousing leaders or hate groups from spreading their philosophy publicly or through various mass communication media. This is J. Edgar Hoover, FBI memo, August 25th, 1967. Now, this is a memo from the FBI that's been sent to FBI agents. Where's the science there? You know, you're talking about rabble-rousing and et cetera, et cetera. This itself is a very provocative kind of statement that's designed to rouse the rabble inside the FBI and the rabble who would read this outside the FBI. So does the media tell the truth? Which truth? I want to say that we have similar experiences in this on this platform, that is to say, with the people who are participating in this forum. I am particularly concerned with the experience that Mr. Wong has mentioned, for lack of a better term. I too come from immigrant parents. In this instance, it was forced immigration. And, you know, because this is the line that they like to, you know, I'm from immigrants and look how well we are today, etc. It was a forced annexation of a whole people who have been dropped in this North American hell and brutalized in the most vicious way, a way that the Oakland Tribune does not even have the ability to recognize. The Oakland Tribune can recognize a handful of shopkeepers with an integrated lynch mob in a downtown square begging for a war on crime. But with all the hungry people in the city of Oakland, we don't see anything about a war on hunger. With all the homeless people in the city of Oakland, we don't see anything about a war on homelessness. With Black people standing in cheese lines, standing in food stamp lines, standing in welfare lines, standing in unemployment lines, standing in bus lines, is it any wonder that we're also involved in mainlining, right? Is there any wonder, is there any mystery about this social responsibility of the media? We come from similar places, immigrants, forced immigrants in this instance, who had no illusions. It wasn't that we thought there was a dashiki seal happening on the other side of the water that we thought we ought to catch. It wasn't that we thought that a few hundred years later, the United States entrepreneurs, as they are called, would be looking for somebody to run a basketball up and down a court. And this is nothing to do. What's the guy name who just broke the record for the most points being scored on basketball? Wow, basketball, dribble, throw the ball, jump up and down and throw it in the hoop, etc. It wasn't because we were anticipating. Can you imagine this? Here we are on the continent of Africa living our lives, and people tell us how great it is that people, these great basketball players, and this guy's even better than Lou Alcindor, who, in terms of throwing a ball through a hoop, right? And what a magnificent thing that we have to celebrate, etc. But how the hell did we get into hoop throwing, basketball dribbling, and what have you from where we came from? It's social responsibility to be able to deal with that. It's our social responsibility. It wasn't that we knew there was going to be a market for Michael Jackson, a broken nose, broken face Negro with so much goo in his hair that he can't stand next to a light bulb without it catching on fire. We were forced here. Negro First newspaper. I worked on a newspaper too. I didn't have normal training. It was one of those things that they like to talk about during Black History Month, a Negro First. And I enjoyed being a Negro first. I had read all the media like the barbershop philosophers do. The most intelligent Negro you can find is someone who reads all the daily newspapers. My daddy used to call us educated fools. And he was right, because we spout that garbage that Mr. Wong helps them to cover up. And Mr. Wong is perfect for it. Just like Lionel Wilson and all those people downtown are perfect for the cover for black people in this community. I was a Negro first. I was the first Negro copy boy for a newspaper in St. Petersburg, Florida, an enlightened Southern community. At that time, the system was more honest, and they called us copy boys. I was the first Negro proofreader for that. I was the first Negro apprentice printer. I was promised to be on the way up to be the first Negro editor of the newspaper. But something happened to change all that. In 1966, James Meredith had the audacity to think to prove to everybody that a Black man himself could walk across Mississippi without fear. He called it a march against fear, and he made out on his trek. He might have made it about 30 yards, and a white man hiding in a ditch shot him down with a shotgun. As a consequence of him being shot, Black folks from all over the country decided to finish the Meredith March. I was one of them. I was a young, quick, smiling, handshaking, nice Negro on the way up. And I went to the cat I worked for, and I said, I'm going to go on that march in Mississippi. It's an important march. I want you to give me a leave of absence. And the boss said, no, Joe. At that time, they called me Joe. During that time, I thought that was my name. That's because the media didn't help me to understand that my history did start in a cotton patch in the South, and that where I come from, people aren't normally called Joe. He said, no, Joe, you can best serve your people by working hard right here at the St. Petersburg Times. They can see your example of hard work and progress, and that will do it. I said, no, man, I'm going on the march. So the best thing you can do is give me a leave of absence so I can split. Today I would say bounce like Wesley Snipes. But rather than do that, they fired me from the job. Now there is another way. Mr. Wong, there is another way. They fired me, and it was probably the best thing for both of us. The birth of the Burning Spear, as a consequence of having been fired, I worked real hard to be socially responsible. And so consequently, we have here the Burning Spear. There is another way. We talk about the pull of the advertisers and the marketplace, because that's the thing that they say help to shape and determine much of what the media will do. That's the same marketplace that's helped y'all to hate the Iranians who take back their oil. It's the same marketplace that gets people who look like Mr. Wong killed sometimes because somebody might mistake him for someone who is Japanese, who is being competitive with the same corporations upon whose advertisements the Oakland Tribune relies. It's the same interest that the invasion of Grenada is a consequence of, and the poor, heroic peoples of El Salvador and Nicaragua right now are anticipating an invasion from. There is another way. We don't consider ourselves alternative media. We consider ourselves a contending force. We are not attempting to exist side by side with the Oakland Tribune. One must survive and the other must be wiped out. Unite with the $90,000 campaign to build the Burning Spear. Unite with the black workers who went on strike against the Oakland Tribune, precisely because it has no place for black working people. Unite with the black workers who call for a boycott precisely because the Oakland Tribune has no place for black people except Mr. Maynard, who they say now owns the Oakland Tribune. So we don't see ourselves as an alternative media. We see ourselves in fierce contention with the media. The Oakland Tribune recognizes this, and we recognize this. We ask for no quarter, and we give no quarter. We are the most audacious force that you might find, a handful of us with a 24-page publication that only comes out monthly. But we know that the contradictions that we begin speaking about will resolve. There will be a time when there will no longer be oppressed nations. The spear will usher the working class into a liberated nation. There will be a time when there will no longer be exploited classes, and our responsibility, our social responsibility to hold up the struggle of the oppressed nations and the exploited classes to go out into West Oakland and to give real information to the workers in West Oakland, not some garbage about Ann Landers or some nonsense about a horoscope that is designed to keep the masses of the people out there with their minds up in the sky while Mr. Kaiser is cutting the very ground from underneath their feet. We are contending forces. We have enough faith in ourselves and the history of an informed people to believe that we will win. As they say in places like that, the Oakland Tribune does not like to write about favorably. Matba imperialism in Farsi, spoken in Iran, this means death to imperialism. So that was the presentation that I made at that forum. And so having said that, and before you move forward, Comrade Director, I saw when we opened up, or before opening up, that we only raised $4,000 some odd dollars for the $10,000 that this process that we're engaged in now to raise money for the Black Power 96.3, which is another component of the media that of the Uhuru movement. And we ought to just go ahead and give the rest, the remaining $5,000 some odd dollars. If we can just go ahead and do that, that'll be helpful. And obviously, we have to support the Burning Spear. And I just want to say, Comrade Director, that selling the Burning Spear newspaper is more than simply meeting a quota by a particular party, organization, or committee. It is the actual day-to-day work that every person who's a member of this party must be engaged in. It is the day-to-day political work. And you don't see members of the Democratic Party, like a lot of black people think they're part of the Democratic Party because they let them sign their name and register for some thug who's going to commit horrendous crimes against them and the peoples of the world. But they don't have any actual role to play, except on voting days and except during contentious election periods to hold up their guy, just like football fans and what have you, who like to talk about my team won or my team lost, and you don't have a damn team. Teams are owned by the corporations, just like the political parties in this country are owned by the corporations. But what we do here, it relies on active, conscious participation of masses of the people. And there is no higher responsibility than any member of the African People's Socialist Party than to exercise on a daily basis the kind of leadership that's required to move us forward, to liberate our people by going out with this newspaper and talking to people and selling this newspaper to people. It's not enough just to put it in a bookstore or put it in some shop in your community and say, wow, I got rid of this many people. No, no, no. What's necessary to do our work, the day-to-day work of the party member, every member of the party is transformed into a leader by virtue of having in possession the Burning Spear newspaper. So from the house that we live in, the apartment that we live in, from there to the store that we have to get to in the neighborhood, usually it's not in the neighborhood, but to the places that we have to go to shop, that newspaper, we should be selling that newspaper. We should be engaging people, because that's makes the distinction of whether we will be kept in this state of perpetual colonial slavery, or whether we will be free along with the peoples of the world who are also struggling for the same objective. So I just wanted to say that, and Comrade Director Akile Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. I just really want to appreciate, first of all, that presentation that you made. And I remember when I read that just a couple of years ago, and this was at a time when I was transitioning into the role of editor-in-chief of the Burning Spear newspaper, and just really coming to terms with the history and the level of responsibility that was being assumed, because it wasn't just, okay, now you're editing some, just a regular journal that's just talking about these things that's happening in the world, but what its responsibility to the African People's Socialist Party and African people as a whole, really having to internalize the significance of having this institution in our own hands, being able to, first of all, put out the analysis, the worldview of the African working class, and how we say when we do every writer's training that we're not just explaining the world, but everything includes the call to action to say what needs to happen as a consequence of this, and that the party, through the pages of the Spear and other types of work, have solved these different problems. So there is something that we can point the people to begin to deal with, these issues, the colonial contradictions that our people are confronted with. And as we've already stated, in the Spear, exactly who the party is, what we stand for, what it is that we want, and what we believe through the 14-point platform that's printed every single month, the party rules of discipline. And this is the way in which, we let the people know this is who we are. And as Comrade Omali said, that's how you gauge, the agenda, and the legitimacy of any organization. You would be able to find in their journal. So it's really critical that we've had this for so long. And that, as you said, it wasn't this thing founded as some alternative media source, but it was founded as a contending source, institution of dual and contending power, under the colonial mode of production. So just really appreciate, the Spear and your leadership that you've provided all this time for making sure that this publication gets printed and distributed to the people, at all costs, making sure that it gets out in the world. And I also appreciate the point you raised about Black Power 96 Radio. And if I may, just for, just a minute, just say that this is also another important instrument in terms of the war of ideas and dual and contending power. And just like all of our institutions of the Uhuru movement came under assault on July 29th with these FBI attacks, this radio station has come under assault. And within the last couple of days, with the local politicians here trying to prevent us from getting resources that we rightfully won. So we're engaged in that battle as well. So, it's just really important that we have these institutions, and we know that they're significant because the FBI, as part of trying to crush this movement, is trying to crush our ability to be able to communicate with our people. I think it was Comrade Paul who commented that we also should mention that the Spear gets distributed into the hands of our brothers and sisters locked up behind bars for free every month. The Spear goes to over 700 Africans, probably way more than that now, into the hands of our brothers and sisters behind bars. And it's circulated literally until the pages fall apart. And it's called the Mafundi Lake Sponsored Prisoner Program. And you can do that today too. The information has been just dropped down, theburningspear.com/prisoner. You can support and this Mafundi Lake Sponsored Prisoner Program, and also sponsor a prisoner, because the colonial statistic is that every African either knows somebody who they have been to prison themselves, etc. So want to make sure that we get the Spear into their hands as well. So we're going to advance this program. We're going to take a moment and look at questions and answers. Or we're going to take a moment for questions and answers. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and get into our announcements. So what is upcoming for the Uhuru movement? So 2023 obviously marks the 55 years in print for the Burning Spear newspaper. We want to remind everyone that you can view past issues of the Spear going all the way back to the beginning issue by going to theburningspear.com/archive. And we encourage everyone to subscribe to the Spear, 12 issues delivered to your door or email inbox or both. You can also gift a subscription to family and friends and support the Mafundi Lake Prisoner Subscription Program by sponsoring one or more prisoner subscriptions. Go right now to theburningspear.com/subscribe. And if you want to become a distributor in your community, you can go to theburningspear.store and become a distributor as well. The Burning Spear newspaper mails subscriptions free of charge to over 600 prisoners each month through the Mafundi Lake Prisoner Subscription Program. If you know someone in prison who would like to receive a copy of the Burning Spear newspaper each month, please go to theburningspear.com/prisoner and fill out the form. The basic day-to-day work of every party member, APSC member, and organizer within the Uhuru movement is to sell the Burning Spear newspaper. So I jumped the gun. Purchase a bundle of 25, 50, or 100 or more to sell in your community. Go to theburningspear.store where you can order a one-time or recurring bundle. Join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. Donate or volunteer to the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign today. For more information, go to handsoffuhuru.org to volunteer, donate, sign the petition, and sign the emergency response pledge. On Saturday, February 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, join the Black is Back Coalition for a special webinar on the history of the FBI's war on the Black liberation movement. To register, go to tinyurl.com/blackisbackfbi. And later that evening, Saturday, February 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, don't miss a special online benefit concert that is part of the Black Power 96 Radio February Fund Drive, Freedom Mic for the Love of Black Power, featuring performances and interviews with world-renowned artists, including Ariane Love of the Stylistics, as well as local going global artists voted #1 by Black Power 96 listeners. This concert will not be live streamed, so make sure to reserve your spot to view and chat with the artists in this concert by registering at blackpower96.org/I love Black Power. On Saturday, February 25th, join the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign for a webinar featuring special guests, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Jalil Mutakim. They discuss the centuries-long state attacks on the African liberation struggle, lifting up our African martyrs in the context of the July 29, 2022 violent FBI raids on the party's Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru movement. This webinar is a fundraiser to build the legal defense for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding their national convention on Saturday to Sunday, March 11 to 12 at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. The convention calls on white people to say no to the FBI's war on Black liberation. For more info and registration, visit uhurusolidarity.org. The All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project hosts the Project Black Ankh International Conference on Saturday and Sunday, March 18th to 19th at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. The theme of the conference is Building Our Own Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Response. For more information and registration, visit tinyurl.com/PBA conference. The African National Women's Organization will hold their annual convention Friday, March 24th through Sunday, March 26th at the Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. For more information and registration, you can visit convention.anwauhuru.org. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru movement speakers for your campus or organization now. You can email us at info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. And for more events that were not featured here, you can go to theburningspear.com/events to see everything that the Uhuru movement is doing. And so you can see the next event or mobilization that you can be a part of. So that's theburningspear.com/events. And as we wrap up our announcement section, want to call on everybody present in this meeting, to take the call seriously, to one, distribute the Burning Spear newspaper, get this out broadly, widely in your community, everywhere it is that we are, and also to join the African People's Socialist Party. Become a member of this revolutionary organization that has this incredible history, including the 55 years of the continued production of the Spear. The Burning Spear newspaper, was a critical part of establishing formally the African People's Socialist Party that would come in 1972. So in 1968, we had this newspaper that was helping to now really bring cohesion to the Black liberation struggle, to pull all of the pieces together, especially as we were at that tail end of around the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. We have the Burning Spear newspaper really emerging and helping to, again, to explain, provide the analysis, and consolidate the necessary trajectory that our people had to go on in order to achieve victory. So the Burning Spear newspaper, it makes sense that it would be that it would come before the African People's Socialist Party, because it was critical to that development within our movement. So again, want to encourage people to take up this history as your own, become a member of the African People's Socialist Party, and distribute the Burning Spear newspaper. So Uhuru, Chairman, we're going to come back to you because we have some questions and some comments that we want to take a look at, and of course, any other interventions that you might want to make. We had Comrade Alikia. Oh, before we get started, let me acknowledge where people are watching from. So we have tuned in with us Jacksonville, Florida, Fort Myers, Florida, Boston, Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, St. Louis, Missouri, St. Petersburg, Florida, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Pocosi Township in occupied Azania or South Africa, Battle Creek, Michigan, Miami, Florida, San Diego, California, Frederick, Maryland, Irvington, New Jersey, Patterson, New Jersey, Oakland, California, Gainesville, Florida, Marion County, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Largo, Florida, Collegeville, Pennsylvania, Cape Town, occupied Azania, and Greenville, South Carolina are all forces who checked in with us today. So if you have not let us know already, let us know where you're tuning into in the chat. And now we'll go into our questions and comments. Chairman, I believe this is a comment from Comrade Alikia, who says, Uhuru, Chairman, I really appreciate what is being said about the necessity for us to read. It is no coincidence that colonizers prevented enslaved Africans from reading. It is also no coincidence that we have poor schooling or no schooling at all in many of our communities and African quote unquote countries. Reading is important in theory, is just as important to the revolutionary struggle. So that was a comment. Did you want to speak to that, or we can go to the next question?
Yeah, I do think that's important. This whole issue of reading, there's a certain significance that has been, there's somebody at that door. Somebody has offered for reading, again, that's, suggestive of being able to advance, like within the colonial capitalist system. But the fact is that reading, this is one thing that African poor people, etc., you don't have like usually credit cards and things like that you can hop on a plane and go to different places around the world and experiences that. But if you can pick up a book, you can pick up a Burning Spear newspaper, and you can go any place. You can go all around the world. People can sit and pick up a Burning Spear newspaper and read about Ukraine, what's happening there. You'll never go to Ukraine, probably, unless you end up on the wrong side and fighting for somebody against your own interests. You can read about Vietnam. People will never do that, generally speaking. Ordinary Africans won't, unless you're on the wrong side. Like we went to Vietnam fighting for the United States against other colonized people. But the thing is that the newspaper, reading something, can have you explore things that you never could. And it breaks you out of this silo, this thought process, just the way that the oppressor would have you view and see the world. You read something and it can take you to some other place. They may intend for you to understand something a certain way, but once you begin the process of reading, it opens up doors to all other kinds of avenues. It's just critical, and that's right. So even the oppressor didn't want us to have access to reading, even if we're going to be reading about our own oppression. And because once you open that door of ability of people to access the world beyond the physical imposition of constraints that's been placed on us, then the people have an opportunity to not only investigate the world, or change the world themselves, and they change themselves in the process. So I agree with Comrade Alikia's observation about why they would keep us from reading.
Uhuru, Chairman, and I had read in different instances where just even prior to being, brought over, brought to this, land that's called the United States today, where, I mean, there was a deliberate separation of African people, and being able to communicate with each other. I mean, just, and all the kinds of horrors and atrocity committed against African people, from, speaking our languages and things like that. And, again, being separated from one another, muzzles, drilled into the mouths of African people, all these things to prevent us from being able to communicate, to talk about our conditions, and to organize. But even in that process, Africans found a way, I mean, and created all different methods of communication in order to carry out different acts of resistance and, fight back against the colonizers. So, but it's just really significant, I think, what we're talking about, because when we say the importance of reading, it's not like this petty bourgeois thing that we hear all the time, just about, like, anyway, what you were summing up in the beginning, about how the African masses, how, it's just characterized like, oh, well, they might not understand, and, things like this. I mean, there's like the petty bourgeois aspect of that, but the importance of reading and understanding the world and having your worldview, having theory, is really, really, really important. And you just brought it to and opened it up to the African working class, that we can possess it for ourselves. And, so anyway, just really want to.
I just want to say, you look at, incredible writers, historically, just if you look at the United States, I mean, you can see just incredible writers. I mean, people who have once gained access. You also see things like David Walker's appeal to tell Black people, the so-called colored citizens of the world, to arm yourselves and to fight for your freedom. And but you look at Pushkin, Alexander Pushkin, from Russia, who, I say from Russia, an African who ended up in Russia through his parents and whatever, became the national literature hero, champion of Russia. And you look at people, the other brother's name, I think, is also Alexander, who ended up in France. His father was someone who I think was from Haiti, and became a fundamentally powerful military force general in France. I'm talking now about Alexander Dumas, who, people don't know it. You romanticize about the Three Musketeers and all this other stuff that he wrote, and based on what his father had been involved in. I'm just saying that these are people, Africans, who have been deprived of freedoms and things like that. But once the chains are taken off of us, you see, our capacity is profoundly significant. And we can access the world, and we can access our own history, which is extremely important. Once you access your own history, and you're talking about reading, I grew up and I was taught in elementary school and beyond that Africans had no written language, that we were just verbal, and that etc. This is what I was taught, and that that Latin was, I think, may have been the premier and first experience with written languages and what have you. And hell, if it were for Africans, there wouldn't be any written languages. There wouldn't be any literature. I mean, but I wouldn't know this if I read the books of the people who was telling me that we had none before, if that was the only thing I had access to. So reading is extremely important. And I agree with you, Comrade Elikia and Comrade Director, about that. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Chairman, that's so interesting, because when I was a sophomore in high school, we were going over ancient civilizations. And first of all, I noticed immediately that Africa was nowhere in the discussion about ancient civilizations. Only Egypt was, as a part removed from Africa. And the same, that this history told me the same exact thing, that the reason for that is that because little history can be known about Africa, because it wasn't passed down in written language. It was all spoken, griots and things like that. Crazy. Anyway, it's not crazy.
Anyway, if you even go back to what the white people call discoveries that they made through what is now like what they call Central America and parts of Mexico. And they call this like Olmec civilizations, what they call it. What the white people did when they got there, they destroyed the libraries. They did this. They destroyed the written evidence. They called it paganism and things like that. And there's a whole history of that throughout our experience. And that's what makes it very difficult for you to be able to rely on much of what others read or write about you. I, as a very young person, I no longer remember where I got access to this stuff, but I read how when the first Europeans came to the lands that's now characterized as the Americas, they ran into indigenous people when they were asking where they should go, and they were told that the black people when they came, they went this way, So, and this was during childhood. This is before the explosion of the 1960s. Recognition of Black history and things like that. We've been there, but someone else has had the power, and when someone else has the power over you, especially when their interest is maintaining control of you, then you will never be able to find your way. That's why we have to write our own stories. And when I say write our own stories, that's really important. So and the Burning Spear has to be a means by which that happens. I want to say this quickly. That the spear has looked different at different times. And as Comrade Director said, that the Burning Spear was really an instrument to pull together the party. It was a tool of the junta militant organization, JOMO, that was influenced tremendously by SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and its practices, particularly putting out mimeograph newsletters, SNCC newsletter, and what have you. The spear was reaching out and coming up as much as we could. Many people were still active, despite the fact that the movement came under tremendous assault. And so the spear was used to try to reach those people and to communicate those people ideas, revolutionary ideas, to continue and develop the theory that was unfolding during that period of time. And at some juncture, the oppressors succeeded in silencing much of the movement. So now the spear, at that time that I mentioned earlier, the spear was speaking directly to masses of people, to Black people in their communities, talking like the people talk and doing other things, etc. At the time, and this was happening because we had cadre forces who worked in the communities who were taking these ideas and writing about them in the language of the community, the masses of the people. At the moment that the rulers succeeded in quieting much of the revolutionary expressions and organizations of the masses of the people, there was a time when you couldn't go into a community in the of Africans in the United States where you did not run into somebody who was selling the Black Panther newspaper, selling Muhammad Speaks, selling the Burning Spear in every community throughout this country. That was the way it was, you see, and we had activists, people who were doing that kind of stuff. And at the moment they succeeded in taking those activists off the streets through, generally speaking, and crushing those organizations, then the task of the Spear had to be to round up people who would be willing to, who would come into organization, have the consciousness, science that would take it out to the world. It was speaking more to what we characterize as the advanced sector of the African community. It was heavily influenced by theory, long articles and stuff like that, trying to win people to a certain kind of understanding and to recognition of the need to come into like revolutionary organization. That's how it was shaped for a long period of time. And to the extent that we win masses of Africans into a movement, to the extent that we have activists, people who are tied to us, who are selling this news, who are in this party, who are in this movement of the party, that means that we've got people now with the ability to go into communities, in the neighborhoods, and who have themselves come to understand this theory, and it belongs to us. That means that we can speak to the people in a language that the people can understand, using the theory, except so it takes on a whole nother expression. So now mass expression is now reintroduced into the sphere. Somebody living in a neighborhood, in the community right here, somebody who's been violated by the police. They find their articles in the newspaper. And then at that time also, you'll find go back and look at some of the old Burning Spears. You see a heavier influence on letters to the editor, because these letters are coming from people in the community, in the prisons, who needed the ability to articulate them. Every letter that they sent, every letter that was read by somebody who's just like them, with the experiences just like them, who need to be brought into political life just like them, etc. So and so somebody needs to be an editor. Letters to the editor. Somebody's over that. Somebody's constantly winning that in the newspaper, winning people to write letters to the editor, making sure that happens in a good way, is prominent, et cetera, et cetera. That's the kind of stuff. I'm just saying the spirit looks different and has looked different depending on where the struggle was and our own capacity as a movement was as well. We mentioned a 24-page paper in this particular article. Well, it's been more than 24 pages at different times. We expected by now to be, printing much more frequently, and we were everywhere. The Burning Spear newspaper was in the Soviet Union. It was in Eastern Europe. It was all over the Caribbean. It was in Cuba. It was everywhere. It was all over Africa, et cetera. And that has to happen again. And so that's part of what it is that we're fighting for. That's the way we represent ourselves out in the world. I got tired. There was a time when I would read about the struggle of African people from coming from someplace in Europe or some other place, and what I was hearing was the white group's interpretation of our struggle, because they had the ability to be in contact with people in Russia or in Eastern Europe or in Cuba or various other places where we didn't. And so what I was hearing about us was what they wrote about us. These are left-wing colonizers who were describing our reality. And I've gone to conferences. That can be boring and tiring and whatever. We have to have our own impact. That's why it's so significant when you can read what Malcolm said himself, even though usually you ended up reading it from something that's hijacked by the Socialist Workers Party, who made all kinds of money, making books of Malcolm X speech and stuff. It was years before Malcolm's family ever got a penny for that. I saw one article, one thing he wrote, where they gave him $65. Malcolm X, $65 for speaking to them. So we have to have our own capacity. That's what we're talking about right now. And I know I probably overtalked the point that I was involved in trying to make now, Comrade Director Uhuru.
For real. No, I think you're stating it just as well as it needs to be stated. Really appreciate that intervention, Chairman. And we're going to take a look at this question that came in from Comrade Amat Samela. Says, Uhuru Chairman, you spoke of social forces and social responsibility. It seems that social forces are what determine the social responsibility people have. Marx says when theory grips the masses, it becomes a material force, is something like that. So can you speak of how the responsibility of the Spear and African internationalism is to create that social force? Yeah,
I wanted to say that, the quote from Marx, of course, that theory, when it grips the masses, becomes a material force. It's no longer just an idea. It actually impacts on the world through a mass participation, which is part of what it is that we're doing with the Burning Spear newspaper. And we are clever, we are ingenious. If you have the stomach for listening to a lot of the hip hop and rap that you hear, you listen to really ingenious, utilization of language. In fact, modern English language is Black language. This is stuff that we've contributed to. Look at your commercials on TV, almost everything you hear, we introduced a whole new thing to it. So that's the thing. But and that's why I used to really like Ice Cube a long time ago, because Cube didn't, come off pedantically, like some kind of professor talking about it. He integrated, like a certain kind of social consciousness into what he was talking about, the lives of the people in the community. That's what we just had a poetry event here that was done by the Black Ankh and NPDUM a week or so ago. Perhaps it was last Sunday. And listening to some of these poets from the community, they brought their lives here. They didn't bring hoes and bees and all that stuff. They brought their lives here, and it was really powerful, and express the aspirations of the people. And that's why we have to have that kind of influence and bring that in. So Carmen Masamela, that's the thing that we talk about. It becomes a material force. And what we've done is create structures and a capacity for people to come in and create the ideological, what do you call it? Sort of parameters for the discussion. There's ideological parameters for all the discussion you hear. The reason you can hear about hoes and bees and all that is because the white people own, the corporations own the entities that put it out into the world. And who are the biggest listeners, the biggest group of listeners to rap music? It ain't you. It's white people. And so what you have are corporations. You want to make it big, then you got to sound like so-and-so. That's just the way it works. You got to have this kind of, you got to have sound like so-and-so. And you sound like so-and-so who the white people want to hear. And what the white people want to hear is about them bees and hoes in your community, which exalts them and while giving you the impression that you are being exalted when you do that. And when the white people listen to music about bees and hoes, in their imagination, what they're seeing is you. And African women are not white women. White women are not the bees and hoes that they're talking about. So you talk about how material force, how you have this articulation that's coming, and then that's reflected in how we live, how we take that back. It's material reality that constructs the ideas, and then the ideas come back and impact on the material reality that we are confronted with, and that comes back. I listen to, somebody's Scarface. What is Scarface? What are they talking about? A movie of killers, white people, Al Pacino, who wouldn't be caught in the black community after dark, with a weapon or not. This is what begins to inform our consciousness. That's the material force that's at work. And so that's why we have to take control of these ideas and theory and what have you. And that's why it's so important that the people who, like those powerful men and women who were here last Sunday with their art, are able to have that impact in the communities, while we have to create institutionalized capacity to extol that. So there can be a way for artists to express themselves without having to sell out their communities, sell out their soul, have to demoralize and corrupt themselves and our culture and our history. So that's one way, I guess, of answering the thing that came from Carmen Masamela. Theory, when it's gripped by the masses, becomes a material force, and that's one of the reasons that they would do everything they can to keep the theory of African internationalism from reaching the people, and declare that it's not black people talking, but it's Russians, and therefore attack them. And that's how serious they take it. And anybody who calls herself a member of the African People's Socialist Party, our movement, has the responsibility to take that newspaper out. Because if you're not taking that newspaper out, then the fact of the matter is that you don't deserve the title a member of the African People's Socialist Party or some component of our party and movement. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. And well, first of all, so there's so many people in the comment sections who just really appreciate this discussion. I just really want to also just appreciate that last call you made, especially regard. Oh, go ahead, Chairman.
The most important rap that we've heard in years, and we haven't heard in a long time now, was Dead Prez. Yeah. And Dead Prez, they were members of the party in the Uhuru movement when they first recorded. And that's how we got Licking the Blade. We show again the role of ideas and how it functions. So that Africans think they're getting over
by participating with the bourgeoisie, with the colonizer and what have you. And they will tell you that. They say, look how important you are. Look how significant you are. We were just looking at, just the other day, there's a funding agency that gave some money to Black Power 96 in Florida. And when the local county government heard of it, because this was a funding agency that was associated with the county government, they came out, are you crazy? You know, they're under investigation by the FBI. They attacked them. And then it was a negress who they extol and hold up. And a negress, came out and said, yeah, they said something bad about me a long time ago. And all of the sympathizers said, oh, they said something bad about these are white people. Oh, we didn't know they said something bad about you. And they all cried copious crocodile tears and said, don't give any money to that black radio station because we don't like what they say, right? So that's what the FBI just did. All of them, they cooperate in that fashion. You must cooperate. You, that is to say, people who are participating in this discussion, you got to take that newspaper out. You got to help fund the newspaper, fund the radio station, whatever, because we're in a war of ideas, and they are determined to make sure that our ideas do not reach the masses of the people, not just Africans, but people, generally speaking, who don't understand what the hell we are about, and they don't understand because there's a distorted message that's been put out by the media. Malcolm X once says that the media has this capacity of making you love your enemies and hate your friends. And that's exactly what it is that we are contending with right now. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Just a couple of things I want to say before going to our next question. First of all, that I really appreciate you again raising that whole attack against our radio station specifically, and how in that whole discussion they are making the case of why institutions like Black Power 96 and the Burning Spear newspaper and every institution that this movement has worked to create to put it in the hands of Black people, just makes the case. They don't like what we're saying, so if we don't have the vehicle to pursue being able to speak in our own interest, then we don't get to speak at all if they have anything to do with it. So this is why we have, things like the Burning Spear newspaper, like our radio station, and it's why it has to get out widely because, this can't be based off of whether or not they like what we say. We have a responsibility to say it, and we have a responsibility to organize around the things that we say. So I really want to appreciate that. And also to the point of the cultural workers. And there was a lot of unity around what it is that you just put out. People dropped Dead Prez and said that that's how they met this movement, through Dead Prez. So people made that statement. Someone says musical artists like Last Poets, Jill Scott Heron, Public Enemy, and others are not widely embraced, but the foolish stuff is everywhere 24/7. And just to say that the Spear and Black Power 96 Radio are both institutions that have given a platform to cultural workers. And Black Power 96 has an incredible program called Local Going Global, which is the brainchild of the station manager, Eddie Maltzby, who, highlights these artists who are not signed by any major music label or anything like that. And we have requirements for people to get, played on air. And the same is true for the Spear. We uphold and we print, the works by different cultural workers and things like that, really encouraging, a whole different type of what a cultural worker is. We redefine it, and that the culture has to speak to and forward the African Revolution. So just wanted to say those things. And we're going to go to this next question that's coming from a comrade Lynn, who asked, what role has the Spear played in combating slander and ultimately fighting back against the state in spreading disinformation? And a follow-up question, how does the Spear continue to combat slander now that social media exists?
Well, I think it's really important for us to understand that our major task cannot be in fighting slander. We have to get to the people and take our message to the people. To the extent that we are successful in changing how Africans and others see the world, then the slander is more or less ineffective. I saw something just the other day on social media platform that said how the party and the Uhuru movement and the Black is Back coalition, that we are organs of the
government, we're the state, we're pigs and CIA agents and all this kind of stuff. Well, been there, done that. You understand? We've seen it over and over again. And there's a way that if you spend too much time, like fighting the quote unquote slander, you validate it. It's like the old saying about slander. Somebody comes up and says, when did you stop beating your wife, right? And when the moment you get engaged in that discussion, you validate the whole thing, so sometimes, you find yourself having to deal with those kinds of specifics. But I think there's a couple of things. One, we have to educate people about things like the political police. And that's extremely important right now. You see how the FBI is moving and the other agencies of political police organizations. So we have to educate people. It's not something that just the quote unquote movement and the militants need to understand. Masses need to understand this. I remember a time when it was true that somebody could come up, black or white, in the African community at our headquarters in St. Petersburg, Florida, and say, or near it, and say, can you tell us where the Uhuru House is? People say, nope, don't know where it is, even if they would live right next door to it, because they feel like if you need to know, you know. I mean, people didn't tell. That's why this whole campaign that's been waged, sometimes by even rap artists and stuff like that, the tradition in the community, don't snitch, don't snitch, don't snitch. If somebody should know it, if they would know it, they would know it if they should. And this ain't got nothing to do with somebody kill your cousin, anything like that. The point is that you can't open up the community to the state. So that's, we just constantly inform the community. And also, I just want to say, Comrade Lynn, that one reason that question would resonate with some is because many have lost, if they ever had, the practice of working in the communities. That we're not engaged in a struggle in cyberspace. We're supposed to be working in these damn communities. And to the extent, I remember in 1960, when was it, 72, when the first African Liberation Day mobilization was held. And when it was being organized for, and I was in meetings, and people came back and said that Stokely, who now Kwame Ture, was opposed to the African Liberation Day because it was to raise resources for people who were engaged in armed struggle against colonizers in Southern Africa. And he was saying that the heads of state, of independent states, were opposed to it, and he was opposed to it. And so they were saying, wow, we got to send somebody to Africa, and talk to them. I said, well, why? And he said, because, Stokely said this, and it could really, if you got a base in your community, you don't have that to worry about. It's only if you're not doing something, you don't have your own base, can that kind of stuff happen. So the work that we need to be doing is building our bases in these communities that we work in, that we organize in, that we should be organizing in, where we are building our markets so people can eat, where we are building, and that's just one aspect of it, the programs that we have, but also we're building political conscience and organization on the ground. And that's the critical thing. So I just wanted to say that is really important for us to redeem this whole notion of working in these communities where we live, where the people live, the masses live. The masses don't live in cyberspace. I don't care how attractive it makes it. That's an imaginary world. The cyberspace is an imaginary world. People live in the real world. We have to go to the real world. You know that maxim that we used to hear about, and Malcolm X used to talk about, white man can't win another a war on the ground, right? And that he's powerful from the air. He's powerful with his airplane. He's got all these missiles and stuff like that, but he can't win on the ground. And that's true. And that's back to Charles Barron's maxim that door to door wins the war, going to the people on the ground. That's where we have to fight, because we cannot beat, what's this guy with the big eyeglasses who owns so much stuff? What's his name? You know what I'm talking about? Bill Gates. These guys and Zuckerberg and all those stuff, we can't contend with Facebook like that, but they can't contend with us on the ground. and we can outwork their asses, and that's what we are supposed to do, outwork their asses, right, on the ground. And, so here's some white guy that nobody never seen before, and he's got more influence in my community and with my next door neighbor than I do, with somebody live across the street than I do, who catch the same hell I catch, who has the same problem buying food that I have. And then here's some white guy who nobody ever seen. I don't know if his feet ever touched the ground. I really don't know that. He may live in some other kind of atmosphere where it's unnecessary. But people who I live in ducking the police. In fact, when the police attacked us on July 29th, some people say, hell, we didn't come out to do anything because we thought they was coming for us. You understand? Because that's the life that we live as Black people, and Bill Gates doesn't. And none of these others who are attacking us have to live like that. So we should have a better relationship with people in our community, in our working class, than they do. And if we don't, then we should be criticizing ourselves. That's what needs to happen. So that's the work we got to do. And you got this newspaper, you're in the party, and you're not selling the newspaper. You're in one of the party organizations, you're not taking the newspaper out. You don't deserve the title of party member. That's just the way that is. Turn in your badge. And all them newspapers you got in your closet. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Wow. I mean, that is so profound. And, I just want to say that, anything that, first of all, I think of 1996 in particular, and the significance of being out there in the community, doing things like distributing the spear, going door to door, and just having these community rallies, but being there, boots on the ground with the people. And how, for decades since, your participation in, the struggles for Black people throughout the South, and especially in Florida, how you were attacked, you were slandered, you were beaten, all of these things had happened to you, throughout your whole history of organizing. And, they would say, they collaborated with all kinds of forces, in St. Petersburg, to say this is who the Uhuru movement is, and watch out for them Uhurus, and well, they say Uruhus now, they just can't get it right. But they say all they put out all this stuff. But if we're in the community doing the work, the community knows that it's bogus, that it's BS. That's why when they come out with a accusation of Russia, people can call BS, because we are there, we exist in those communities. They can put their hands on it, they can see and experience it, they know it, but they can't know it if we don't have that relationship, with them. And we form that relationship through distributing the Burning Spear newspaper. And I mentioned 96 because this was a situation where the party was out there all the time in different ways, and constantly hitting the streets with the spear. And so when, the state came and attacked this building on November 13th, 1996, with the intent to kill you and leaders of our movement and members of the community, this community was the thing that rose up and fought back. And they didn't need Tampa Bay Times to tell them who the Uhuru movement was or anything like that. They knew who we were. And that's why they came out and put their own lives on the line to put out the fires, to shoot down the police helicopters, and to push back 300 pigs. That's the significance of being in these communities with the Burning Spear newspaper. So
and one of the most telling things that came from the bourgeois media there in St. Petersburg at that time was the quote that they ran on the morning following the attack on the Uhuru House, where they said one of the commanders on the radio communication thing said, "Pull the troops back. We're under heavy fire," and that was extraordinary. And that was the people who rose up against them. Do the work. That's the critical thing. Go out among the masses and carry out your responsibility. Carry out your responsibility. Every individual. Don't you understand? The Burning Spear gives every member of the party in our movement a leadership role, a leadership position. The party believes in leadership. That's a critical thing. Not just me, not just people who are head of your unit or head of your local party organization or head of your regional committee or something like that, but you. When you go door to door, when you stand on that corner and with that newspaper, you have an opportunity when somebody's coming out of the supermarket with their food and stuff to grab one of the bags and help them with it, and at the other hand that you're telling them about the burning spear and why they need to buy this burning spear, you have an opportunity to walk up to somebody you don't even know and say, guess what's happening in China? Did you know this is happening in China? Same thing happening. How can you just walk up to people ordinarily and have that kind of discussion? You have to be armed. Armed with the Burning Spear newspaper gives you access to masses of the people and information that you can take to masses of people to help them be organized. And I just want to say this, that when we talk about the spear as an organizing tool, we don't simply mean that people read the Burning Spear and as a consequence of reading the Burning Spear, they learn how to organize. No, what we mean also is the spear is an organizing tool because the process of getting that spear to the community, having your meetings and saying, we're going to be here, we're going to be there, we're going to take this newspaper out, we're going to move it to this community, that community, we're going to be able to, in this region, we're going to go to the spear. That's an organizing tool. It's a tool that helps us to get organized. That's a critical role and responsibility of the Burning Spear newspaper and you. That's what you got to do. And otherwise, you're just hiding in the party. You're just hiding in the party, and we don't need that. We need people who would take the work out. And if you hide, this is what they want you to do anyway, just to hide. They want us to quit. They want us to hide. Become the leader that you have to be. Become and find a way. I mean, there was a time where Marcus Garvey, with the Negro World, as it was called at that time, and this is in the 1920s, and there were governments in Africa and other places where they would prohibit this newspaper getting there. But there were Africans who were sailors and stuff. We would sew the newspaper in their coats and smuggle them into different countries and places where it was prohibited. Get that newspaper to the masses of the people. Hold your reading groups. Have people who come on a regular basis. If they can't read to them. Go to nursing homes. Every place you can. Talk to the people. Give the people this information. Educate this community. And then we become a formidable force that nobody can stop because we're going to be free. And that's your responsibility to help carry out that mission. The Burning Spear is the tool that you have in your possession. We used to say that they're fighting for our freedom with different kinds of weapons in different places around the world. But take a Burning Spear newspaper out with you. That's your equivalent of an AK-47 and club the enemy to death with the Burning Spear. Boom, 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 boom. This is the Burning Spear. Carry out your task, your work right here where you're located. That's what you have to do. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru. And there are people who are hearing this call. No more gangs talking. That's the username on YouTube. Says, I'm going to flood my area with spears. We also have Joey, who also said they're going to order their bundle of spears as well. So right on, comrades. Thank you so much, for hearing that call to get the spear out in your community. Also, there have been others that have heard the call around supporting one of our other institutions, Black Power 96 Radio. And just want to take a brief moment to thank everyone who donated to Black Power 96 Radio last week during this same Omali Tommy show. And the Omali Tommy show did surpass its goal, and the station is still working to reach its overall $10,000 goal for the February member fund drive. So we want to thank you to those who answered the chairman's call again this week, and in some cases gave another donation. So Leah in Minneapolis, Penny in St. Louis, and the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, both who donated in the memory of Omawale K. Fing, and an anonymous donor in Kansas. I want to thank all of you for donating again today during this study at the chairman's call. Appreciate that, comrades. And again, we are trying to raise $10,000 from now until February 18th for Black Power 96 Radio. And you can make your contribution at blackpower96.org/donate through our Cash App $Black Power 96, or through mail. You can make a check out to Black Power 96 and send it to 1245 18th Avenue South, St. Petersburg, Florida 33705. So thank you, comrades, brothers, and sisters, for your contributions to Black Power 96 and for uniting to get the Burning Spear out into your community. And you can check the chat section for information as to how to go about getting the Burning Spear, and also donating to Black Power 96 and everything else. Our chat monitors are working extremely hard to make sure you are equipped with all the information you need to carry out those directives today. So thank you, comrades. And let's see if there are any other questions or comments that we want to take today.
I wanted to ask a question. I'm seeing something from a name I'm not familiar with, Alfredo Soria, and mentioned Monica San Diego. Is this Monica San Diego that I would know that's being mentioned here? Can the person who made that comment, is this Monica who was with compañero Ernesto Bustillo? But go ahead, comrade. I just saw the name, and they can put something in the chat if it's.
All right, Uhuru. And I'll look out for that as well. We also have Wandalyn Hayes. Comrades want to make sure we're getting Wandalyn Hayes, who is out in Atlanta, Georgia, who says that he wants to be a part of helping to build a chapter of the party there in Atlanta, Georgia. So Uhuru, comrades, salute. One of the best ways to start doing that is permeating the ground with the Burning Spear newspaper, of course. So we can get spears into there, but also I know our chat moderators are working, so we can get you the necessary information to you. So, Chairman, it doesn't look like we have any more questions or comments, but I do want to acknowledge also different locations I checked in: Chicago, Illinois, Tacoma, Washington, Tampa, Florida, Birmingham, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, Raleigh, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Bermuda, Alamo, Georgia, and Norfolk, Virginia as well. So, hooroo, comrades. So, Uhuru. So, Chairman, and this is around the time where we would be wrapping up for this discussion. And I just want to encourage everyone again to get their issue of the Burning Spear. And as Kate Fing would say, you go out there and make you a real friend, not those friends on social media, but go out there and make you a real friend by going out there and selling the Burning Spear newspaper. So before we close out, Chairman, do you want to just give us any closing remarks? So we can conclude today's powerful study. Uhuru.
I just want to thank everybody for remembering Comrade Omawale K-Fing. K-Fing, he ended up in Vietnam when he was in the U.S. military. He experienced some serious consequences of that, not the least of which, of course, was a certain kind of political education that the Vietnamese imposed on everybody who was there, and many people who were other places. And he, experienced various kinds of social contradictions once he got here. But he was involved in Houston, Texas, with People's Party #2, which was in many ways like a replica of the Black Panther Party that was based in Houston, and the government murdered Carl Hampton, who was the leader of that organization. They assassinated him with the help of a Black preacher there, who lured him out into the streets so that he could be sniped by an armed government terrorist. K-Fing worked with me in some of the most extraordinary circumstances throughout the United States, and ultimately he ended up experiencing a lifetime ambition of going to Africa, where we organized there as well. He was a true journalist, and there were various contradictions that K-Fing had to deal with that I was quite conscious of most of the time. But he was beloved by anybody who knew him because of his commitment to our struggle. And so I really appreciate that mention. I also wanted to say that what you will notice is that every struggle that people have been engaged in where power was assumed, one of the first things they do is get the radio station. They take the radio station to talk to the people. And virtually every struggle where it's been possible, you go back to Cuba and the Sierra Maestra, where the Radio Free Cuba was broadcast from the mountains to the masses of the people in Cuba. And when Robert Williams, who was in Africa in 1957, had to leave this country because he organized against Klan terror in Monroe, North Carolina, the Cuban government allowed him to set up Radio Free Dixie and gave him a radio station that he could speak to African people with here. And traditionally, that's been a critical recognition that we have to communicate ideas and communicate with the people. And that's our responsibility. And sometimes you can't do it like this. And I'm going to, an example I've used in the past, Comrade Director, I know we hitting close to the time, but during the struggle in Vietnam, the heroic, courageous, extraordinary Vietnamese people and revolutionaries. They lived under this autocratic, thuggish government that had been put in place by the United States government. And they didn't have the access to free press, just like we don't have access to free press here. But even it was more stringent, the repression of the people. And so they would take to measures like going to the top of rooftops in the night. And they would take flyers and things like that and wet them down and leave them in strategic places during the middle of the night. And then when the sun would come out, it would dry the pages, these stacks of papers, and the wind would blow them all over the city, and the people would have access to this communication. I'm mentioning this to speak to about the genius of the people, a determined people, a people who are determined to be free. You have to create that capacity and get in the Burning Spear to the newspaper. There's nothing, I know you're like me, you're tired of people telling us what we can't do. We can get that newspaper out. We can write for that newspaper. We can distribute that newspaper, and that's responsibility. You notice that in the 1960s, well, you don't because you're too young, most of you. But there used to be a lot of black bookstores. They're not there anymore. They shut them down. They shut down even black radio stations that used to exist throughout this country. They don't exist anymore. So this struggle that we're involved in, you have an opportunity to play a critical role here in helping to open up avenues of communication with the masses of our people and with each other. And just calling you to take up that responsibility and also to express appreciation to you, Comrade Akile. It's no accident that they made you, that is to say the federal government, one of the targets of the so-called unindicted co-conspirator. You had the audacity to come right out of high school into, well, you're already in there because your daddy was here, and what have you, but come into this movement and to provide such startling, incredibly significant leadership. So I wanted to appreciate that. Wanted to appreciate comrades like Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, who are leaders in the Solidarity movement, who have also become unindicted co-conspirators because of the work that they're involved in to take this word out, to bust up this encirclement, this information and ideological encirclement that this government would impose on us, and that would try to keep there by using 5 a.m. raids, pre-dawn raids, and flashbang grenades and automatic weapons. So what kind of feeble force is this? I mean, first of all, you don't have a weapon that can destroy an idea. And I just want to say that's our responsibility to get these ideas out among the masses of people. And you're about 81 years too late. Thank you very much, comrades. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, Uhuru, comrades. Also, Chairman, wanted to make sure you saw Alfredo Soria said Uhuru, Chairman. Yes. That is
oh, it's good. Yeah, splendid. It's good to hear from you. Yeah, we love you so much. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades, Uhuru, Chairman. So that will do it for this incredible discussion that we've been able to have. And I want to thank the Omali Tommy Show team for helping with this production. I also want to thank all of you for tuning in to today's study, for committing to selling the Burning Spear newspaper, for donating to Black Power 96 Radio. Whether you were watching on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, we're glad to have you on with us. And want to thank, again, you, Chairman, for your relentless leadership, the profound history of the Burning Spear newspaper. And, as we would say, we got to keep the spear burning. And make sure to follow the Chairman on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru, comrades, vanguard up, relentless.